All right, good evening, everyone. We are on Sadi Gimel and Bays, 93b, 22 lines from the top, so it's probably 93b2, I would
Mm-hmm.
assume.
Yep.
We are sponsored this week by Jeff and Chava Bela Wald, Le'ilu Nishmas, Jeff's uncle, Mr. Michael Weiss, Mary Yehuda ben Avram Yitzchak, Zichron Levarach was your site. It was on the 21st of Av. May his neshama have an aliyah.
Amen.
And let's finish up. Let's get some. Let's talk a little bit more about getting the blood out of particularly bloody areas. Reisha bekivsha. If you've got the head of an animal and you put it onto some coals. So we said before that in order to get blood out of something, you need to cut it open and salt it well. That'll absorb the blood. That's way number one. Way number two is to hang it over fire and roast it, and then the blood will flow out. And we had been concerned what would happen if we had the piece, and we put it directly on the coals. So here we've got this head of the animal, and we put it directly on the coals. So what happens then? Osve abes hashchita. If you place it so that the area where the blood comes out, the neck that was cut into, is towards the coals. So dayiv dama vishari. So then the blood is going to flow out of it, and then that means that you're going to be able to eat that head. You're going to wind up being able to get the blood out of it that way. Atzdodin, if you put the head on its side, so then mikva kapi, then what you're going to have is the blood is going to congeal inside the head. It's not going to flow out because the only way for it to get out is through the neck. And if it's on its side, it can't get there. It's just going to congeal inside of the head, and then it's going to be prohibited to eat. Osve anechire, if you place it nose side down, so then dots beimidi. So what you need to do is you need to poke a hole through the front, right? If you poke a hole through the nose into the brain area, so that way you get into where the blood comes out. So then shari, then you're fine because the blood at least has to have a way of escaping. However, v'ilo, but if you don't, so then osir, then that's going to be prohibited, right? So you've got to be able to. I remember my mother. Liver is one of those things that you have to broil because it's got too much blood in it to be able to kosher, so you can't cut it open and salt it. So you get a liver, so you roast that. And I remember my mother, when you would get the chickens, so she'd get the liver, and then the liver would have to she would take a roasting pan, and there would be holes. She'd make sure to poke holes in it so that the blood would seep through, because it's in accordance with this Gemara, right? You want to be able to make sure that there's a place for the blood to seep out of and roast. People don't do that anymore. Now you just go to the store and buy liver in a container, but just that's the way it was. So Ikadamri, there are those who say Anichirei ve'abes hashchita do'iv, that either way, right? If you put it on its nose or on its neck, so then the blood is going to flow out. Atzdodin, but if you put it on its side, idots beimidi, so then you need to poke some kind of a hole in there through the side, so then the blood will flow out. Ve'ilo, osir, and if not, not. Right? Basic bottom line, you have to have a place for the blood to escape. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, back to the Gid Anashe. Rabbi Yehuda says in Shmuel, Shnei Gidin Hein. There's two different sinews, I guess we call them tendons, the Gid Anashe tendons, and they are, as we talked about before, Pnimi, the inner one, Samuch le'etzem, which is closer to the bone, that's Aser. That's the one that's prohibited. V'chayavin alav, and your chayav lashes if you eat that one. Chitzon, the outer one, Samuch lebasar, which is closer to the meat, is Aser, is still prohibited, but that's midrabanan. It's only rabbinically prohibited because you can get confused. So therefore, ve'ein chayavin alav. But you're not chayav malchus for that. Ve'hatanya, but 1 second, we have another brisa that says, Pnimi samach lebasar, the inner one, which is close to the meat and absorbed into it. So then, Amar Rav Acha, Amar Rav Kahana, Rav Acha says, Rav Kahana, iklude miklud. So it goes into the. Oh, sorry, that's the answer. Sorry. So samach lebasar. So this says that the inner gid that we're talking about is close to the meat, and then that must mean that it's found on the outside. That's not called the inner one. It's called the inner one because it goes deep into the meat, but it's still found closer to the outside. So therefore, how is it that Shmuel says that the gid, that's the inner one, is the one that's found on the inner side of the thigh, where this is saying that the gid is the one that's found by the meat. So that's where Amar Rav Kahana, Rav Acha says in Rav Kahana to answer it, including miklud. What happens is that this is it's closer to the bone, but then it ends up, including miklud, I think the word means literally a key, right? A lock, a key and a lock. The tendon goes into the meat. And so therefore that's why this brisa calls it the inner one, which is close to the meat, because even though it really is closer to the bone, it nevertheless enters into the meat area, and that's the gid anasha. Veha Tanya, but we have another brisa that says chitzon, the outer one, which is samach le'etzem, which is close to the bone. So that's the one. Now it's called chitza. Chitzon, it's outer one. So now we're calling the gid anasha the outer one. What's going on here? Someone Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yusuf says heicha depare tabache. The answer is it's not really an outer one. It's not in the flesh. It's not that outer one. It's just that when the butchers remove the skin from the animal, it becomes exposed, right? It becomes visible, and that's why we call it chitzon. It's the outer one that becomes exposed. It's not the outer one, but it's the one that becomes exposed, which is close to the bone. Itmar. Okay, something that we said. Tabach shenimtza chelev acharov. So let's say you go to the butcher shop and you look in his store, and he's got some forbidden fats for sale in his store. Rav Yehuda Amar, Rav Yehuda says, if you find a barley's worth amount, so then we're going to punish him. Rav Yochanan Amar, bekazayis, and the other one says, if you have a kazayis of the chelev, that's where you punish him. Now Rav Papa v'lo pligi. Rav Papa says, there's no argument between the two opinions. Kan lehal koso, kan le'abro. To give him lashes, so that's a kazayas, right? Because a kazayas is already a significant amount. To fire him, that's even a barley amount, right? Once he allows that, it doesn't mean that he's intentionally trying to get people to sin, but it does mean that he's careless. And so therefore, we fire him. Now, what difference does it make, right? If somebody is careless, so I think that I was listening to somebody who was Rabbi Rosner share, and he had commented that the process of reinstating a butcher in this circumstance is he's got to wait 30 days. They have to announce that he was careless in shul. He has to say, I'm sorry, and then he can return to his job. So basically, he gets a 30-day suspension for not being careful enough. However, if it's a large enough piece and he's legitimately, he doesn't care enough and he has a whole kazayas, then you fire him. Then he's chayav malchus. He can't go back to the job. He's got to rebuild his trust. It's not so simple. Amar Marzutra. Marzutra says kisaura b'makom echad. It has to be a barley size in one location, right? Meaning, if it's little bits, little chunks that are like little small pieces in various places around the animal, that doesn't count. This has to be, he left a significant enough of barley size in one place. But a kazayas, when it comes to a kazayas, afilu b'shnayim u'shloshim bekomos, even if it's in 2 or 3 different places around the animal, it's already a large enough of a size. He needs to be more careful than that. The hilchos of the halacha is lahal koso b'kazayas, to give him malchus. He just has to have a kazayas amount. Labro, to fire him from his position, is bikasora. He has to leave over a barley amount. Okay, the next thing the Mishnah said was Eina tabachin ne'emanin. The butchers are not believed about removing the gid hanashe. That is the first opinion, and the Chachamim said we do believe that. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Yochanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, Rabbi Yochanan, chazru lomar ne'emanim. They changed their mind. The Chachamim, right nowadays, they changed their mind. They said we do trust them. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Akashur Dori. He says, I don't understand. The generations have gotten better. Normally, we have a concept that the further we go from Har Sinai, the worse we are. Right? We're lower generations. Each subsequent generation is a lower generation. Now you're suggesting what? Before we didn't believe the butchers. Now the butchers are better. Like what? How do you explain that? So the answer is Meikara Dehavu Savri La Rabbi Meir. At first, right? They held like Rabbi Meir, and that they're going to have to dig into the gid, into the meat, and really get the entire thing out. That's a difficult process, and as a result, you couldn't trust a butcher who said that he did it because it's too hard to be able to do. Ulavasof, but in the end, Savri Rabbi Yehuda. They decided the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. You don't have to dig all the way in. Rather, you just have to pull it out, right? You just have to take off the surface amount. And so therefore, since it's not quite as significant a hard thing, therefore they said, well, we can start believing the butcher's name. Ikademasni la aseifa. Some people told this Rabbi Yochanan said that this statement of Rabbi Yochanan was said on the next part of the Mishnah, where the Mishnah says, "V'chachamim omrim ne'emanin alav." Al hachelev, right? So the Chachamim say that the butcher is believed on removing the Gid Nashe and on forbidden fat. Some Rabbi Barabba says, Rabbi Yochanan, Chazru Lomar Ein Ne'amanin. They changed and they said they're not believed. Amar Rav Nachman says, Bisman Zen Ne'amanim. Nowadays they are believed. So this is like a strange thing. First, they were believed, then they weren't believed, now they're believed again. So what's going on here? So the Gemara says, a kosher dari, you mean that the generations got better? Right? First they were believed, then they weren't believed, but then they got better again. So meikara. So here's what happened. At first, Savrua Rabbi Yehuda. First they held like Rabbi Yehuda, and they thought they only had to remove the outer part of the gid. Hadar Savrua Rabbi Meir. Then they said, no. With the halacha is in Rabbi Yochanan's time, they said the halacha is like Rabbi Meir. And so therefore they had to dig it out. And then it was much harder. So therefore, Yehuda lo mehimni. So they all said, we remember how easy it was to get the Gid Nashe out during Rabbi Yehuda's time. And that's basically what they were doing. So even though the halacha required them to dig all the way in, like Rabbi Meir, they weren't. They were only doing a Rabbi Yehuda type of thing, and so therefore they weren't believed. V'hashta, but now, dan shiyua l'Rabbi Yehuda, they've all forgotten about Rabbi Yehuda, right? Nobody remembers that way. All the new butchers are being trained to dig it out, like according to Rabbi Meir Shita, so we believe them again. Okay, so then the Gemara says the Mishnah talks about ala chelev. We're going to believe the butchers about the forbidden fats. So the Gemara wants to know, chelev man dekar shmei. What are we talking about chelev for? The whole Mishnah is talking about the Gid Nashe. All of a sudden, hey, butchers are believed to remove the forbidden fats. So hachi kamar. This is what the Mishnah means to say. Ein ne'emanin alav ve'al hachelev. Right? The butchers are not believed about removing the Gid Nashe or removing these forbidden fats. To which the Chachamim say, ne'emanin alav ve'al hachelev. We do believe them both about the Gid Nashe and about the forbidden fats. Next Mishnah. Sholech adam yarech lo'ovei kochav. A person can send a whole thigh to a non-Jew with the Gid Nashe still in it. She'agid hanashe betzocha, with the Gid Nashe still in it, mibnei shemekomo nikar, because it's clear if you've sent him the whole piece, that's where the Gid Nashe is. So what are we worried about, right? We're not worried about the non-Jew eating the Gid Nashe, of course, because he's allowed to, but we could be worried that the non-Jew will then resell it back to a Jew. And so then he's got a Gid Nashe, the Jew will eat it with a Gid Nashe. So we're not going to worry about that because the area of the Gid Nashe is perfectly recognizable. Okay, so says the Gemara, let's figure this out. Shlima in chatucha lo. The thigh has to be complete, cannot be cut up, right? Cannot be cut up. Because you have to be able to see that the Gid Nashe is intact. Once you cut the leg up, it becomes impossible to tell where the Gid Nashe is anymore. You can't tell. So, but my askina. So let's figure out what are we dealing with here. There could be a circumstance. Well, first of all, we have to know that the town, the town is. Hang on one second. Let me just my son with the bris just sent me a message. I just want to be able to make sure that he knows I'm going to answer him after Daf Yomi. Okay. Sorry about that. Just want to be able to make sure that he gets that. Okay, so anyway, so um, in the town has mostly kosher butchers. All the butchers are kosher, right? However, they then sell it to the market people. Well, I would say that the shochtim are kosher, right? The butchers then are not necessarily Jewish. Okay, so what happens is like this: all the meat is kosher, but then gets given to non-Jews. Now you can give the meat to the non-Jews when it's a treifa, right? The non-Jew can still have it. I can give it to him with a giranasha. I could give my non-Jew, my non-Jewish butcher, I can give him, he can sell it to all the non-Jews. It doesn't have to be kosher meat. So how would they know if a Jew goes to the store and wants to buy meat? How would they know whether the meat was kosher or wasn't kosher? If there was a town, they would when a animal came up that was a treifa, they would make an announcement in public. They would say somebody shechted an animal and there's a treifa, and then it would go to the non-Jews. At that time, the Jews would know, don't buy from the non-Jewish butchers because there's a treifa animal being sold. However, if there was no announcement, then they would know that all the meat was kosher, and you can go to the non-Jewish butcher because everything's kosher anyway. Or you could have a town where they don't make any announcements. If they don't make any announcements, you can't buy anything from the non-Jewish butchers because you don't know when they're getting a piece of non-kosher meat or not. Okay, so here's our case. Okay, so Ilema, let's talk about the Mishnah might be talking about in a situation b'makom she'ein machrizin. They make no announcements in this location. So you're giving this piece of meat over to a non-Jew. So chatucha nami lishoderle. If that's the case, so then nobody's buying from non-Jews because there's no announcements being made. Therefore, why do you have to worry about giving the animal the leg full to a non-Jew? Even if it's cut up, you can give it to the non-Jew because you don't have to worry Jews are going to buy it from him because Jews are not buying from the non-Jewish butchers in that town because nobody's announcing when something's not kosher. Therefore, you have to presume everything that they're selling is not kosher, and therefore nobody buys from the non-Jews. Daha lo asu lemizba mine. Nobody's buying from these butchers. Ella, rather, we must be dealing with b'makom shemachrizin. We must be dealing with a circumstance where they are announcing it. Okay, so now what happens is that they're announcing it, so therefore Jews are buying from these non-Jews. Therefore, I have to worry that if I give this meat that's cut up to the non-Jew, a Jew might buy it. So shlema nami lo lishodirle. But then why would you be allowed to give him a whole one? Because then the non-Jew will cut it up and he'll sell it, right? It's going to get cut up anyway. So the answer is ibayis ema b'makom shemachrizin. So number one could be, well, you could answer it one way, which is a town where they are making announcements. Ibayis ema b'makom shemachrizin, or a town where they're not making announcements. If it's a town where they're making announcements, non-Jews cut their meat differently. So therefore, it would be recognizable that this meat is coming from a non-Jewish butcher. So therefore, they won't eat it if the non-Jew cut it up. However, right, if a Jew were to cut it up, so then somebody might purchase this meat that went to a non-Jew, because they would say, hey, they'd make an announcement. So if it wasn't kosher, no announcements, so therefore they'd be buying it from the non-Jew. So they're buying it from the non-Jew. And if you cut it up, so then it looks like perfectly kosher, cut up by a Jew meat, and everybody's going to assume the Gideonash is not in it. And that's where people are going to make the mistake. However, if you sold it to him whole, so then he cuts it up, people are not going to buy it. So that's answer number one. V-boy say more, answer number two. It's a situation where nobody is going to be buying from they're not making any announcements. And therefore, none of the non-Jews are going to be buying it. None of the Jews are going to be buying it from him. So what's the problem? So the answer is we might have a misunderstanding happen here. What if, even though nobody's buying from a non-Jew, what if my next door neighbor sees me selling this leg that's cut up to a non-Jew? So he's going to presume that I'm the one selling it, that I've already removed the Gid HaNasheh. Therefore, he's going to run into the shop and buy it from the non-Jew. Normally, we wouldn't buy from non-Jew, but he saw where it came from. So he literally saw it just came from me, therefore he'll buy it. So therefore, we say it's possible, even in a situation where they're not making any announcements, that you can't give it to the non-Jew if it's been cut into pieces. Or else, if you want, I'll give you a different answer. Mishum de kagoniv le ledate. The answer is because you may be tricking the non-Jew, right? The non-Jew sees that you're giving him this nice piece of kosher meat, and he really thinks very highly of you as a result of the fact that you gave him a nice piece of kosher meat that you would eat. And so therefore, he's going to treat you nicely as a result, and you're really tricking him because the Gid Anosha is still in it, and he thinks the Gid Anosha is removed. So therefore, you can't hand it to him when it's cut up so that the non-Jew won't make a mistake and think that the Gid Anosha has been removed. You've got to hand it to him when it's in it so the non-Jew can recognize that it has not been removed. Damar Shmuel, as Shmuel says, Aser lignov das abrios, it is prohibited to trick a person, afilu dato shel v'kovim, even a non-Jew. Right, and this is a halacha lamaisa. You cannot play tricks with non-Jews. Right, so this is practical. Right, if I decide, I really am interested to know what a Porsche feels like to drive, walk into a Porsche dealership and say, I'd like to test drive one. Right, might be a problem of Gnevas Das. Right, because the guy who's the salesperson might think he's making a sale, but I'm really tricking him. Right, if I walk in there and say, I'm not buying this, but do you mind if I test drive it anyway? Then you're fine. But you cannot mislead somebody into thinking that you're thinking one way, but you're not another way. Yes, Yehuda.
Would he be a chayav malchus if he tricked someone to that?
So I don't think so, and I think this would fall into the category of a lav she'im b'maisa prohibition there where there's no action, right? Because it's only speech. So therefore, there's really not going to be any lashes that come as a result if you violate this. But it is bad practice, right? Bad practice. V'hod Shmuel. Now, right, this comes into this Gnevas Das comes in all kinds of situations and circumstances, right? You're not allowed halachically, for example, let's say somebody's already been invited out for Shabbos, right? Give them a call and say, hey, do you want to come over to my house for Shabbos? Because now he thinks, oh, you're invited, but you're really not inviting him. You're really only saying you're inviting because you know he's going to turn you down anyway, right? So these are all sorts of things. This idea of tricking people or acting in a dishonest way are all brought lahalacha. You cannot act that way. Now, cheating on tests. I always tell the students, cheating on tests is Gnevas Das, Isser D'Oraisa, right? Your teacher thinks that this is the grade, this is your work, and you're turning it in as such, but it's not your work, right? Another issue of Gnevas Das. And my students always say, but it's a non-Jewish person, right? So it doesn't follow. So the answer is, Gnevas Das is Asr Midoraisa Afilu Avodas Kachafim, even for non-Jewish teachers, right? It's always prohibited. Now, this which Shmuel said that Gnevas Das is a prohibition, la beferish itmar el miklala itmar. He never said it, but people derived it based on a story that happened. Shmuel hava ka'ovid b'mavra. Shmuel was on a ferry crossing the river. Amar le lisham'e. He told his servant, right? Paise limabure. Go pay the ferryman for us. Paise. So the guy did. He paid the ikbid, and Shmuel got mad at him. My time Lakebid. Why did he get mad? Told him to pay, he paid. Amar Rabbi says, Tarnagolis treifa havai. What happened is that they had a treifa chicken. And v'yavinile b'mar dishchuta. And he gave it to the ferryman as though it was a shechted chicken. And that's a trick. Because the ferryman thought, oh, I'm getting a nice chicken. But no, he was getting a treifa chicken. Rava says, Anpaka Amar Le Lashkuye. He said, what he did was he gave him wine in a container known as Anpaka. And Anpaka is a container. They used to have wine that was stronger, and then it would have to be diluted, right? 3 parts water to 1 part wine. Usually when it was undiluted, it was kept in this container called an Anpaka. But this wine was diluted. So he gave him wine in an anpaka, and the ferryman probably thought he was getting undiluted wine. But Ashke Chamar Meziga, he filled it with diluted wine. I never told him that it was undiluted wine, but based on the fact that he handed it to him in that utensil, right? Halacha l'maisa, for example, right? If I want to show up to somebody's house for let's say l'chaim, whatever, and I already have some scotch in my cabinet, and it's already took a couple of shots, so I refill it with water, right? Put a little bit more water. Cannot do that, right? Can't do that. Because if you do that again, you're making people think that you brought the whole bottle, and you didn't. Now, dechi v'chi micholamai. who cares that it was a story? So at the end of the day, we've come to the conclusion he doesn't like this Gnevas Das, right? So the answer is Leman Damar Treifa Havai. The answer is because I've got other ways of looking at it. And to be again, if you're dealing in a Gemara about Gnevas Das, we've got to be fully upfront where we learn it from, right? So first of all, according to the opinion that the chicken was a treifa, Amar le'amai tishaya isura, he said maybe he was upset not because it was a gnevas das issue, but because he gave this non-Jew this non-kosher chicken. Who knows who he's going to give it to, right? Could get back to a Jewish person. So therefore, that or sorry, that's the issue. What happened was he was upset. Why did we keep the treifa chicken? The rule is that if you have something that's non-kosher, don't keep it, right? Get rid of it immediately because somebody's going to make a mistake. If you find out that you've got something non-kosher in your possession, don't hold on to it. Throw it away right away, right? So he was upset that his servant had a treifa chicken with him. What are you holding the treifa chicken? It's like, because I can give it to a non-Jew for payment. No, as soon as we find a treifa chicken, throw it away. We don't want, because somebody's going to mess up. So he was upset at his servant for keeping the treif chicken around. Ulamandamar anpaka. So, and according to the opinion, said it was the container called the anpaka chaya mashma. It implied that the anpaka has raw wine in it, and so therefore it's more than a gnevas das. It's really a trick, right? That's right. That's like almost that's really lying. That's way worse. So, but in the end, in conclusion, we say, no, it's a matter of Gnevas Das. That's why he was upset, and therefore Gnevas Das is prohibited. Tanya, we learned in Rabbi. So, Hayri Meir Meir says, Al Yisariv Adam Lechavero Lisodet Slovia Deabosh Soed. Right? A person should not, I said this is where it was come from. I knew it was like familiar, right? Person shouldn't tell his friend, come over to eat with me, right? And he knows that the guy's not coming, right? He knows he can't make it, but you're going to invite him anyway. Lo Yarba Lo Betikroves. Don't the guy doesn't keep, the guy keeps Chalav Yisrael. So you go over him and offer him 100 Hershey bars, right? Don't offer him a bunch of gifts that he's not going to accept, right? That's Gnevas Das. It's inappropriate. Don't do that. Right? What happens is you've got barrels of wine and you've already sold the barrels to a storekeeper, and a guy walks in and says, I'd like to have a glass of wine. You go, oh, you know what? Let me open a brand new container for you. And you hammer the spigot in, make a whole show. You're opening up a brand new container. You sold the container. You're going to give the whole thing with the spigot over to the storekeeper in 2 minutes. The fact that you took a cup for him is nothing, right? So, but he thinks it's the biggest deal. Can't do that. Elohim Kain Hodio. You've got to tell him. Lo Yomar Lo Soch Shemen Mipach Rekon. So a person should not take a empty container of oil and mention right. I guess the guy knows that the other person doesn't use oil on his skin, right? So you take out a container and you say, hey, you want to use my oil? But you know your container is really empty. So you know he's going to refuse it anyway. So you offer him, right? You know that he doesn't want, right? You have your empty beer, right? You know the guy doesn't drink. You say, hey, do you want some of my beer? Knowing he's going to say no. But you get credit at least for offering. Don't do that. The imbishvil kivodo mutter. However, if you do it because you're showing him honor, let's say, for example, there's a bunch of people around, right? And so now you want to show honor for your rabbi. So you want to make a demonstration to everybody there that you're offering him some, then it's okay, right? Ini, is that true? Ula ikla lebe Rabbi Yehuda. Ula went to the house of Rabbi Yehuda. Pasach lo chavios ha-mechuros lechenvani. He opened for him containers of wine that were sold to a storekeeper. And odia udei. So the question is, how is he able to do that? Isn't that Gnevas Das? So the answer is Odui Ode. He told his teacher. He says, I'm going to offer it. I want to offer you from this. I'm going to open this container because I already sold it. So he told him. Or else, if you want, I can say Shani Ula Ula might have been different. Chaviv le Rav Yehuda de belav hachinami ptuchid miftach le. That Ula was different. He really loved Rav Yehuda, and therefore, even if he hadn't sold this barrel, he would have opened a brand new one. So therefore, it wasn't really a Genevas Das because he was serious. He would have done it. Lo yelech adam beis ha'avel. Person shouldn't go to the mourner's house. Yado login hamizkashkesh, and you've got a half-filled container of wine. Lo yimalenu mayim mipnei she'matehu. Right, this is the one that I had mentioned earlier. Right, don't fill it with water because that's tricking people. Ve'im yesh sham chaver ir mutter. However, if there is a group of people that are there, and so therefore what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that it's clear that the mourner is important in your eyes, and therefore you don't want to show up with a half-empty bottle, then it's okay to do it, right? Lo yimkor adam lechaveru sandal shel mesa bichlal shel chaya shechuta. A person shouldn't sell a shoe that's made from the leather of an animal that died, as though it was from a leather from an animal that was shechted. Why? For two reasons. Number one, you're tricking him. The leather from a shechted animal is stronger than an animal that died of natural causes. Maybe it's because the animal was probably sick, and maybe its skin is not as strong. Maybe possibly. And the second of all, you don't know what the animal died from. The animal could have died from some dangerous illness. And now he's going to walk around with the remnants of this dangerous illness on his feet. So therefore, you got to tell him where it's sourced from. Don't give your friend a barrel of wine with oil floating on the top of it on the opening, because people will think it's filled with oil, which is a more valuable product, and that's a trick. Well, Maisa, there was a story that happened like that. Person gave his friend a barrel of wine with and there was oil on the opening. So the guy thought he had a whole barrel of oil, so he invited a whole bunch of guests. So he got into his house, and he sees, it's wine. He committed suicide. He strangled himself because he was so embarrassed that he didn't have any food to give the guests that he invited. If you are invited as a guest and a person serves you something, you can't give it to the children of the person who runs the house, right? So, right, I invite people over. People shouldn't take the food off their plate and give it to my kids. Why? Unless you have permission, right? Unless the owner gives you permission. Maisa, there was a story that happened. A guy invited 3 people to his house during a famine. The only thing that the guy had to eat was 3 eggs. So everybody got an egg, right? The kid, the child of the Balabayas came along. The first guy says, "Oh, you want mine? I'll give you mine." He gave it to him. So too the second guy did the same thing, and the third guy did the same thing, right? The father of the child came in, that the kid had 1 egg in his mouth, and 2 in his hand. And he got really mad. He got so mad that he hit his kid, he fell to the ground and died. When his mother saw that the child had died, also she jumped off the roof and committed suicide. So he went up to the roof and he jumped off the roof and died. So they all committed suicide. So Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Al davar zeh nargu shlosh nefashos b'Yisrael. This simple mistake, 3 people died. So therefore, rule: don't give away the food that's on your plate to the child. Right? That's the rule. Right? In practice, the halachic question comes up when you're a guest at somebody's house and you get food on your plate. Whose food is it? Right? Is it your host's or is it yours? Right? At some point you're eating it, you think it becomes yours. What's the practical difference? Let's say somebody serves me a hamburger and I decide I'm going to take this hamburger and I want to marry a woman with it. And I take the hamburger. With this hamburger, I thee wed. right?
The fact they gave
And
it, the fact they gave you the hamburger, that means they gave it for you, which means now it's yours to
oh,
eat.
so this seems to be seems to be the question, right? Seems like from this Gemara, this is sort of the egg belonged to the people that it's given to, right? So it's not necessarily so simple, and it's up for conversation, discussion that what's it's given to you with a specific purpose. It's potential that you're only allowed to give over if you eat less than what was the amount that the host would normally give you, right? So you can't take, like, for example, if you're gonna the host is giving you one hamburger, if you hand it off to this lady and say, marry me with it, now it's her hamburger, you got to take seconds, right? Well, who says the host allows you to do that? He's not giving you an all-you-can-eat buffet. He's giving you a serving. So it's a subject for discussion. My Kamash Malone. So now what's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov coming to tell us? Dekule Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that this prohibition that the guests can't give to anything that's in front of them was all because of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. This statement was all Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Okay. Tanarabana, a rabbi's one. Hashalech yorech lechavero shlema. Somebody sends a thigh to his friend and it's complete. It doesn't have anything the ginasha taken out. Eino tzarech sheyitol himena ginasha. You don't have to take the ginasha out because since you're sending him the whole thigh, it's clearly visible the ginasha is still in it. Chatucha, but if it's cut up, tzarech litol himena ginasha. You got to take the ginasha out first. If you're sending to a non-Jew, bein chatuch bein shlema, whether it's cut up or not, eino tzarech litol himena ginasha. You don't have to take the ginasha out. Now, the Brisa says, there are two reasons why you're not allowed to sell a nevela, animal that has not been shechted, or a treif, an animal that was shechted, but has a damage inside of it, so that it is not kosher. And we're not allowed to sell those to non-Jews. Number one, because you're going to trick the non-Jew, right? He thinks that you're giving him something good and you're giving him something that's not quite kosher, and he's presuming positive things about you. Another reason is Shema Yachsarvim Karena Yisrael Acher. He might take it and sell it to a Jew. Also, a person shouldn't tell a non-Jew, here's some money, go to the store and buy me some meat, right? First of all, because you don't know what the non-Jew is going to do, right? That what he might do is he might go to the butcher and buy the meat on credit and keep the money, right? You don't know that he's an honest guy. Another reason is Shema mochrin lo nevelos u'trefos. What might happen is you might find out that when the butcher is going to know this is a non-Jewish guy, so therefore the butcher is going to sell him non-kosher meat, not knowing that he's really buying it for you. Amar Mar said. So let's talk about what this Bryce is dealing with. First, the first part of the Bryce says that when it comes to a non-Jew, right, you're going to sell him this, right? If you're selling it to a non-Jew, you don't have to take the Gidanasha out. So, but Maya Skinon, what's the case that we're dealing with here? If we're talking about an area where they announce when there's a treifa, so then that means that people are buying from non-Jews because they know that if it's not kosher, they'll find out about it. So chatucha amai gidanosha. Then if it's cut up, why don't you have to take out the gidanosha? A Jew might buy it, so you have to worry about that. Kevan de lo achruz, since there's no announcement being made, people are going to buy this piece of meat from the non-Jew. Rather, we must be dealing in a case where no announcements are made. Okay, so now nobody's buying from the non-Jew. That's why you can hand over the piece of meat with the gidanosha to the non-Jew. Okay, fine. That's the first part. We're talking about a situation, a town where they don't make announcements. Now let's go to the middle case. The next case in the Brisa says, there are two reasons why you can't sell nevelos and trefos to a non-Jew. Number one, because you're tricking the non-Jew, and echad shema yachsarvim karena Yisrael acher. You might sell it to another non-Jew. Now, if they're not making any announcements, then why is it the Jews wouldn't be buying it from him, right? So therefore, That's a problem. It's clearly a place where they are making announcements, because otherwise, how come the Jew is buying it from him? Okay, so first part is not announcing. Then the second part says they are announcing. Now comes the third part of the brisa. Ema Seifa, third part of the brisa is lo yomar adam lovei kochavim. A person shouldn't tell non-Jew kachli b'dinar zab basar, go get meat for me with this dinar. For two reasons. Echad mibnei ha'anasin. One, because they may keep the money. The echad shema mocher lo neveil trefos. They might sell the non-Jew neveil trefa. Now, if what we said in the middle cases, we're talking about a place where they're making announcements. So so why are you worried about the fact that the guy might buy, but the non-Jew might get treifa meat? If there was treifa meat around, there would have been an announcement, right? We just said they're making an announcement. It must be a situation where they're not making an announcement. So that means reisha v'seifa b'makom shemachrizin, the first part and the third part of this brisa, they're not making any announcements. But mitziyasa, in the middle part of the brisa is b'makom shemachrizin, they are making announcements. What's going on? The brisa keeps switching its circumstances. So Rabbi says yeah, that's right. Don't worry about that. That can happen. Brisas, right? The first part is talking about one case. Second part is talking about a second case. Third part is talking about the first case again. Right? Reisha v'seifa b'makom shemachrizin. The first part of the brisa and the last part of the brisa, they're not making any announcements. And mitzias of the middle case is b'makom shemachrizin, where they are making announcements. That's how Abaye answers it. Rava says no. Kula b'makom shemachrizin. They're making announcements in all of the cases. So reisha v'seifa. So in the first and last cases, shechrizu, they made an announcement, right? So therefore, since they made announcements, therefore, that's why they made announcements. So therefore, that's why in the first case you're allowed to send this meat with a ginanasha to the non-Jew because announcements were made, and also the person can't send the non-Jew on his behalf to the butcher because potentially there's nevela in the store, right? Because therefore somebody might sell it to this fellow who's a non-Jew on his behalf, so you have to worry about that. Metzia the middle case is Shiloh Hichriz was a situation where there were no announcements made. And so therefore, if you find Nevelos and Trefos in the butchers, right? So then they can't sell it to a non-Jew because there's no announcement that day. So then non-Jew might sell it to a Jew, and that would create problems. Third answer and explanation is Rav Ashi Amar Kula b'makom she'ein machrizin. No, I'm going to tell you it is all circumstances. There's no announcements being made. If there's no announcement made, nobody should ever be buying anything from a non-Jew. So therefore, mitzios, the first case and the last case, right? We don't have to worry about it because there were no announcements because they were not going to buy it from a non-Jew anyway. Mitzios, the middle case, why it's still prohibited to sell the trefos and nevelos, even though to a non-Jew, even though nobody's going to buy it from him, is Gzeira Shema Yim Karena Bifnei Yisrael, because, as we said, there may be a problem that somebody's going to see the Jew selling it to the non-Jew, and then they'll think that must be kosher because the Jew sold it to the non-Jew in the first place. So therefore, that's why we don't ever buy it from a non-Jew. We don't sell the trefa to the non-Jew, even in a circumstance where the Jews would not buy it from the non-Jew anyway. Okay, we're going to make announcements, right? There's a treifa animal, nobody buy from non-Jews. How are you supposed to make that announcement? Don't you think that non-Jews might get upset that such an announcement gets made? So Yosef says, Nafal Bisra Livnei Chelo. They would just announce a piece of meat was made for the soldiers. So people would know soldiers are not Jewish, right? So people would know what that meant. Why don't they announce a treifa has been made for the soldiers, right? Why do they have to hint to it? So the answer is lo zavni. If you announce that, then you're making it sound like the meat is bad. Then they won't buy it. So therefore, they just say it's a piece of meat that's good for soldiers. Isn't that Gnevas Das? You're tricking the non-Jews. So the answer is in who dikamatu nafshayu. These non-Jews, they're fooling themselves, right? That they would think they should know to ask the question, where does the meat come from? So the fact that these non-Jews are not asking where does the meat come from, right, indicates they don't care, right? So therefore, it's their own issue, right? There's not a trick that's there. Like there was a circumstance. There was a story of Mar Zutra, the son of Nachman, that he was going from Sichra to Bei Mechoza. V'Rava Rav Savra havu ka'asu l'Sichra. So there was, and Rava and Rav Safra, they were going from Mechuza to Sichra. Pagu hadadi. They met each other on the road. Hu savar la'apei hu deka'asu. So he thought that he was coming to meet him. So Amar lahu lam l'Rabbanan deteruach v'asu kulihai. He says, why did you rabbis, went out of your way in order to greet me? Thank you. I'm honored. Amar le Rav Safra. So Rav Safra said, Anan lo havayadina dekasimar. We didn't even know you were coming, right? If we had knew you were coming, we'd have baked a cake, but we did not know that you were coming. We definitely would have done when we would have baked the cake. We would have done more, right? So that's where the song comes from. So Amarle Rava said, "My time amartle hachi dachalishte ledate." Why did you tell him that? Right? Right? You've made him upset. He thought we were coming out to honor him, and then you told him we're not. Why did you keep your mouth shut? So he said, because that's Gnevas Das. Can't make him think that we came to honor him when we didn't. So well, no, he's tricking himself, right? He's the one who drew the conclusion that he didn't say, hey, why are you guys here? He just drew the conclusion. He jumped to the conclusion himself. So therefore, that's not our responsibility. And if we didn't do anything to lead him on, right, that's not our responsibility, right? That's not in Isser of Gnevas Das. Interesting, right? There was once a butcher who said to his friend, Tzadi Heyman Aleph, Ihavis paisos minoi, lo safaye loch mishur shalpam de avdi esmol. Right? If he said they were in a fight. So he said, I had the most amazing dinner last night, and if you were friends with me, right, I would have shared my ox with you, right? But too bad you're not my friend, so I didn't invite you over. It was the best barbecue you missed. You have no idea. That's what he told him. Amar le, so the guy says back to him, Achli mi shufrei shufrei. So he says, you know what? I had a better barbecue last night. I'm glad I'm not friends with you because I had a better barbecue. So Amar le, so the first butcher says to him, Minolach, where'd you buy the meat from? So Amar le, so he says, Dezavan ploni yovikochovim v'sofali. He says, I got it from this certain non-Jewish butcher, right? And that's where I got it from. So Amar le, so the first butcher said, Trey Avdi, he says, I lied to you. I had 2 oxen that I shechted last night. Bahu Treifa. The first one was Treifa, and I gave it to the non-Jew that you bought it from. You ate treif last night, ha ha ha. So that's what he tells the guy. Okay, so now, right? So now nobody wants to buy meat from the non-Jews right now because he just announced that there's treif meat going around. So now what do you do? So Amar Rebbe, so Rebbe says, because this fool this guy makes this announcement, who does this thing that's not right. Anu nesar kol mekulin. Now none of the markets are kosher. This guy, he's an idiot, right? That's not an announcement. It's an official announcement. So you don't have to pay attention to that. Rebbe l'ta'ameh. So Rebbe is going according to his own reasoning there. Da'amar makulin v'tabachi Yisrael. So he says that if you've got marketplaces that are non-Jewish, that are in a city where the people who are doing the shechita are Jews, basar hanimtza biyado v'kachavim mutter. If you have meat that is found with a non-Jew, it's mutter, it's permissible because all the meat is kosher, right? So therefore it says, so now, Ikadamri, there are those who said that the story went like this. Amar Rebbe, this guy is a fool. The whole reason why he said it, can't believe him. This guy said it just to cause a problem for his friend. He must have made it all up. Anu Nesor Koma Kulin, so we're going to say, the marketplaces are prohibited. And time of decovering the reason why we don't believe him is because his intent was to fool around and mess with his friend, right? Halav hachi, if it were not for that fact, so then also, then okay, then his announcement would have, in fact, made all of the meat prohibited. But V'hatan, you're going to write so. Rabbi Omer, Rabbi says, Makulin v'tabachi Yisrael, if you've got marketplaces of non-Jews and the Jews are butchers, Basar nimtza biyado v'kachav mutter, that if you find meat by the non-Jew, it's kosher. So the answer is Shani Hacha. This is different. This chazek isura. Here we know it's different. This changes things because we know that there's a treifa floating around someplace. So since we know that that there's a treifa that's going out, right? He sold it, the person who's a butcher, the person who's the shechter, sold it to a non-Jew. So we don't have to worry about it. Amar Rav. Rav says, Basar, so if you've got meat, if you lose sight of the meat, ulcer, you cannot eat it. So this is a halacha l'maisa practical case, right? That's why when you buy things from a caterer or they wrap it and they seal it in a container. But basar nesalam, what are we worried about? We're worried that the piece of meat that I had here that was kosher got taken by an animal, and then it got replaced by a different piece of meat that is not kosher.
That's why that's where you need a double stim.
That's why we exactly right. That's why we double wrap on everything in order to prevent this prohibition of basar shenis alim minha ayin. So meisvei. So he asked the question. Rabbi Omer, Rabbi says makulin. So Rabbi had said that if I have non-Jewish shops, v'tabchei Yisrael, and the Jews are the butchers, so then basar nimtza biyado v'kachav mutter, meat that's found in a non-Jew's possession is permissible. Why? So isn't that basar shenisalim min ayin, meat that people are not seeing? The answer is no. Nimtza biyado v'kachavim shani. If it's found by a non-Jew, if a non-Jew is watching it and supervising, that's different. Remember, we're worried that an animal is going to take it, and then another one got put in its place. Here, the non-Jew is watching this piece of meat. That is good enough, and therefore we don't have to worry about it in that circumstance. Tashma, come and listen. Teisha chanuyos kulan mochros basar shechuta. Famous case. We have 9 stores selling kosher meat. V'achas mocheres basar nevela. One store sells non-kosher. V'lakach me'achas mehen. He buys from one of the stores. Ve'eno yodeh me'ez me'lakach. He doesn't know which store he bought it from. Sfeiko aser. It is prohibited out of doubt. Why? Because this is what we call kol kavua kemechza mechzedam. Right? That's what we call it. Anything that is set in one place is as though it is 50-50. This is a very difficult logical thing to come to a conclusion. Many of the explanation of Farshim explain that this is just exeras akasav. It is a Torah. It is a rule. The law says in the Torah that if I have some motionless, immobile object, then I look at it. It doesn't matter that the majority, the possibilities that it came from was permissive. Here it is right now. It is therefore a 50-50, and I can't use it. Others suggest, I think Rosh Shimon Shkop is one, suggests that when something is in a location, that location becomes its place, and therefore that location becomes choshev in some sort of a way, and therefore it's a 50-50, right? Am I saying right? So it becomes a 50-50. So I've got this, the bottom line is I've got this piece of meat, and I don't know where I bought it from. It's prohibited. Ubenimtza, right? So however, let's say, right, he finds it, right? So the doubt occurred, right? Not in a circumstance where he had a set place for it, right? He finds it in the street, someplace like that, where we don't know, then therefore, halach acharov, you go by the majority, right? If it's not a location where it's set and established in my kitchen, I just don't know where it came from. This is like it's around and it's in the middle of all the stores. I can presume it came from a kosher store. So now, problem is, why? You don't know where it came from. That means nobody was watching it, and therefore you shouldn't be allowed to eat it. The answer is no. There's a non-Jew who has it, right? The non-Jew has it. Again, it's not basar nesam min ayin if the non-Jew is holding onto it and can tell you that this is the same piece of meat. Tashma, come and listen. Matzah ba basar, a Jewish city that non-Jews live there. You find a piece of meat. Halachach rov tabachim. You have to decide whether it's kosher or not based on whether most of the people who do the slaughtering are non-Jews or not, right? Im mevushal halacharov ochle basar. And if it is cooked, so then you have to be able to go by the majority of people who eat meat, because who are the people who could have cooked it? So if one, as long as you can presume that somebody is Jewish cooked this meat, so then you can presume it to be kosher. Now, v'chitema. So now we're going to say, how can you? Because again, you're in a suffix because you don't know where the meat came from. Doesn't that mean that it's basar shenisalam and ayin? It got hidden from your eyes. You don't know where it came from. V'chitema hachanami. And if you say, okay, yeah, that's right, but nimtza biyad ovik kochavim, that we're dealing with a circumstance where it was in a non-Jew's possession. So mavushach charovach lebasar. Well, if it's cooked, why are you going by the majority of people who cooked? Nechse idove kochavim, not lay, right? So then we should find out, right, if the guy who's holding it, the non-Jew that's holding it, if he cooked it or not, right? If we know he cooked it, then it's his. Ed Yisrael not lay. So, or we could be able to say, right, or if a Jew has it, so then when we know that he cooked it, and then it's mutter. So the answer is what's going on here? But omeid vero ehu. The guy saw that a person was holding it, and therefore he does not basar nishon bin ayin, but he was too far away to tell who the person who's holding it is. So he doesn't know whether the person who's holding it is Jewish or non-Jewish. So therefore he can't answer the question that way. All right, we will stop at this Toshma on Tzadi Hey Amid Aleph towards the bottom of the page.
Beautiful. Shkoyach, Rabbi Loiterman.